once more speaking to us. This afternoon, I will be having another one-on-one conversation with my brother, Cheta Nwanze. Now, this broadcast this afternoon is titled The Feud Between Anioma Igbos and the Igbos of the East. To come this afternoon, or to have this conversation this afternoon, as I said, is going to be my good brother, Cheta Nwanze. Cheta, you're welcome to the Media TV. Greetings to you.
Thank you for having me. Day one.
Okay, there were everybody. Thank you once more for agreeing to have this conversation. It's been a while, we've been having back and forth trying to schedule this. It's never been easy. I reckon it's as a result of COVID.
Yes, Ima that. So, for example, the last time I suppose he made this thing with, I happens to be in the client's place because, to put it very simply, I naturally go kita and the client called and I, as the client called, I had to say, yes, I'm coming. So we were in their office and I thought I had a quiet spot to do this recording, and we had started talking, but two of the clients people kept coming in and even coming into the shots to weave. You remember now? So
yes,
we had to reschedule for a more quiet time. Unfortunately, last week when we rescheduled for, something happened, so I had to drop everything and attend to that. I mean, the truth of the matter is that the world has changed. We are living in a very different planet following this COVID thing. And I think it's in the interest of everybody to understand that and to prepare for what is to come. Because, so let us start with you people that are in more civilized places. The public transport system is going to change because social distancing. We are going to have to see a return to a situation where public transportation is not run for profits, but just run as a public good, because with social distancing, there's no way anybody can turn a profit. And this kind of thing will cascade into everything from flights to movement generally. So there are a lot of business meetings, as an example, that's we can do it on Zoom now, so no need for you to travel. So business travel is going to be affected. And how does that affect the airline industry, as an example? The typical cost of a flight from London to New York, I think, is about $500 or something like that. Now, it can be that cheap because there are people in the front of the plane, business travelers, first class and business class, that are paying thousands of dollars. So just them alone have already taken care of the cost of the flights. Economy is just to ferry people. Now, a lot of business travel will be hit. So economy prices will go up in order to cover the cost of the flights. And this one, that some airlines are still talking of socially distanced flights. So there's going to be issues.
Yeah, but so far, even the flights that we've seen, I mean, there isn't much practice of social distancing. Rather, I think actually the social distancing, if people wear masks, honestly, because aircraft is normally, well, not in Nigeria, that aircraft sometimes can be like a heater. But if people really wear masks, it will.
There was a report in the New York Times today about advice that is being given by some health authorities. I forget
to
where.
discourage masks.
No, not to discourage masks. About the fact that to discourage air conditioning.
Okay.
Yes, that and basically an aircraft is compressed air conditioned air for whatever the period of time is the flights. It's the same air that is circulating. So it depends on how there will almost definitely be a second wave of this COVID. It depends on how this second wave manifests. If it's manifests and you can trace it to the resumption of flights, then the aviation industry will definitely be asked to apply socially distanced flights. That will be a problem.
Anyway, let's come back to, let's come to the meat of the matter today, Cheta. And on your Twitter page, actually, your name, I just want to, let's start by knowing who is Cheta, because on your Twitter page, you have a Checksta, which is CHXTA. How does that come? Is that, it's supposed to be an Igbo name that means Cheta Chuku, or what's how, how come about?
Cheta Kwana Chukwunomunso is
Cheta
the name my
Kwana
father
Chuku
gave me.
means, yeah.
Yeah, it's the name my father gave me. But
Okay.
oge no primary school, so Fazal Nabini, and oge no primary school, only one of my friends, one of my classmates, Christian Edige, onye Bini, and for some reason, Obiana bomb Checksta, 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 and the name stuck. Throughout secondary school, oh yeah, Madonna bomb. And even me, I got to find that I actually liked it. Initially, the first time he called me that, we fought. The way children are wont to do.
Yeah.
But as we grew up, in short, then there was another person who added B. So the full thing is actually Chicksta B. I liked it, and so I adopted it. And it's out of respect for my father that I didn't go and do a change of name to legally change my name to
He would
Chicksta
have
B.
he would have disowned you, baby, if you have done that.
Without even thinking about it.
Okay, Cheta. So can we know a little bit about you, your background, where you're from, what you do, and
Okay, afam bụ Cheta Nwanze. Abụ m onye Anioma.
mm,
I don't subscribe to the states because Ezioku, the states are artificial creations, and if you study the history properly, you get mad that Anioma doesn't just encompass what is not the Igbo speaking part of Delta states. It encompasses some parts of Anambra states, Onitsha, Atani, and parts of Anam. Because of the shared history that we have. I think one thing that a lot of Igbo people need to understand is that the states that exist today were creations meant to divide us. So one of the things that irritates me the most is when I see an Igbo person saying, "Oh, Abomoya Anambra, Abomoya Imo." What the hell is that? Forgive me if I swear. Um, the truth of the matter is that we have a shared history, we have a shared identity, and including taking into account dialectal differences which exist in every major language that covers a large area. If I go to Abakaliki and speak my own dialect, the man from Abakaliki, by listening closely, he will understand what I'm saying. Same way, the man from Abakaliki chooses to come to settle in my village, Umuachi, and is speaking his dialect. I understand everything he's saying. The only thing is that I just have to, kind of like the way someone in the UK is listening to someone who is from London is talking with someone from Leeds. You understand that they will have to slow down their speech in order to understand each other, but it is the same language they are speaking, just dialectal differences. When two languages have dialectal differences, it's quite different from when two languages are mutually intelligible. So uh, the Igbo dialect that is prevalent in Wawa, for example, in places like Aku, in Unsuka, near Unsuka, is mutually intelligible with the Igala language.
mm,
However, there are two different languages. It's just when two of them speak and listen very closely, they can at least strike a conversation. If we go a bit further afield, outside of an Igbo, you find that the same thing occurs with, say, in Edo states, Edo language and Isha language. There are two distinct languages. They are not different dialects of the same language. They are two distinct languages, but they are mutually intelligible. If we go to Europe, where you live, I can see that John Okolie from Bayern is online now. John Okolie is in Germany, and I'll give an example. Up until the globalization of English as a language, English was mutually intelligible with German. So an Englishman would say, "My house is your house." The German would say, "My house is thine house." And when you think about that, "my house is thine house" go to your Bible, especially a Bible that was printed 50 years ago, that still used those old English, thy shepherd's staff, thy, which is basic, which is similar to the German dein, is what used to be English for your. So we need to understand these things. We need to understand that unfortunately the Nigerian states had a policy of trying to divide us as a people, and quite unfortunately too many of our people fell for those um, little bits of drama. I think that the time has come from for Igbo to pull together and change the conversation. We have a lot to do.
So just you just mentioned it now as you talked about John Okoli. Do you understand? Do you speak German?
A bit. I learned German at a point in my life, but some of these things with lack of practice.
Okay.
So, yeah, if let me put it like this: if you drop me in France or Germany, I will pick up after a while. During the World Cup in Russia, I ended up being sort of a translator for a group of Nigerian people that we especially in St. Petersburg. I was reading the signs for them and doing some little translation. But I found that I was doing it very, very slowly because I was completely out of practice. I mean, these are languages I learned um, and then stopped using 15, 20 years ago. So
So
when you're
where did you learn them?
I grew up on a Nigerian university campus in the 1980s. I was very interested in languages, and back then, the University of Benin had quite a few international staff. So, for example, Mrs. Ezomo was it? Well, I don't know if she's late now. She's Russian, so I learned from her language. My mom schooled in Germany. I learned German from her, and French. We had a very good French teacher, Mrs. Lawal. So you learn these things from these people. You actually have kind of conversations with them. And then you find that when you move out, so when I moved from Nigeria, I found that these things were useful. But then I moved back to Nigeria and I've not had the opportunity to use them.
Okay.
I've been back in Nigeria for 11 years now.
Okay. So I mean, let me again let the viewers watching get to know you better. You said you moved out of Nigeria. Where did you live? Where did you
I lived in the UK for 5.5 years.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
Before you
But
moved back?
before I moved back. But London is an international city.
Yes.
So my closest friend in London was a guy called Thomas Lemaire, French guy, fanatical Paris Saint-Germain supporter. So we used to banter in French. I think that was the best time I got to use my French.
Mm. Okay. Now, to the meat of the matter here, to this topic, basically the discussion will center on the Igbos of the East and Igbos of the West. And you wrote that some people from this area have pointed out that they have been victims of taunt by some Igbos from the east of the Niger who have themselves said that Delta Igbos are not Igbos. Do you think for one moment that there is a divide between the Igbos of the West and Igbos of the East?
There is a divide. I don't think it's something we should deny. There's a divide that existed prior to the coming of the colonists. Um, the divide was because one of the things that we should take into account is the fact that our people did not move around as often as the Europeans. And when I say our people, I mean Africans. Consider traveling a distance of 10 miles. Now, the average person can move 5 kilometers in an hour when the roads are paved. But for the most part, we lived in a tropical environment with a very densely forested area. So moving between towns. So for example, if you say you wanted to move between the old Onitsha and Opo, which today looks like a very short distance. Back then, 100 years ago, they were both of them were two distinct towns, separated by a distance of about 20 kilometers. That's almost a whole day's walk. So movement between those towns was not as commonplace as we think it was. If you walked between both of them, the possibility that you would not come back that same day was very high. It's one of the reasons why, in many respects, we moved separately. And you need to understand that the Igbo identity as we know it today, and I'm always very careful to point out the as we know it today, it's a very, very important distinction. The Igbo identity as we know it today did not exist 100 years ago. Think about it. The same applies with the Yorubas. As an example, the Yoruba identity as we know it today did not exist 100 years ago. Think about it. The first printed newspaper in Nigeria was I can't speak Yoruba, so I wouldn't even try to. But the translation of the newspaper was today's news for the people of Yoruba and Egba. Now, today, an Egba man, the Egba people are people from Abeokuta and Abeokuta, Shagamu, and the areas around. If you tell an Egba man today that he's not Yoruba, he's going to find you very ridiculous.
But he's
But 100 years ago, the fact that the title of the first newspaper in what is now Nigeria, 150 years ago, the title of the very first newspaper was Newspaper for Yorubas and the Egbas. For that newspaper to make that distinction tells you a lot. So it's pretty much the same way when the British attacked us. I even did. When the British attacked the area that eventually became Igbo land, there was no unity of purpose. So, for example, when they decimated Asaba in 1888, the only people who came to try to help the man from Asaba were the people from Onitsha, because both Asaba and Onitsha were quite close historically. The man from Obosi did not care. After the British were done with Asaba, they turned their attentions to Onitsha. The man from Obosi did not care. Neither did the man from Newe. Neither did the man from Oka. You understand? Because each of us lived in our own silos, as it were. Of course, occasionally, because we spoke a similar language, occasionally we used to interact. But essentially, in reality, we were living in silos. So it's important for us to understand where we're coming from. The Igbo identity as it exists today was the creation of, to a large extent, of Bernard Ilua, who was the Secretary General of the Igbo Progressive Union. And he did something that nobody has ever done before that and since then. Between 1947 and 1953, Bernard Ilua went to every hamlet in both Western and Eastern Igbo land to convince the people there to buy into the projects. Some people did, some people did not. So as an example, Abo, which is in today's Delta State, did not buy into Bernard Ilua's projects. There's a community, I keep forgetting the name, but it's an Igbo community in Benue State now. They did not buy into the projects.
Okay.
Pardon me? Yeah,
No,
they didn't buy into the project.
I thought about Ibanke, but I remember Ibanke is in...
No, Ibanke, which was called Igbo Akiri at that time, bought into the project. It was 20 years later, because of the Civil War, that they decided that they no longer wanted to be Igbo. So
Yeah, we will get to that point
yeah,
later.
some
But
communities in today's Imo states did not buy into the project because of historical differences and the fact that the word Igbo in some communities had a connotation with slavery. So it's important for us to understand these things, these issues, so that we will know where we're coming from. Because it's when we know where we're coming from that we're able to chart a path forward.
hmm. Okay. Now, if I come back, you've given this historical context, but the key question is, do you consider or do you think there is a divide between the Igbos of the East and the Igbos of the West? And when we say Igbos of the West, I mean that is the Delta Igbo, aka, you know. So, do you think there is a divide?
There's definitely a divide. The divides was created by the colonial masters in as a response to the Aba Women's Affair of 1989. So again, it's always important to go back to the historical records to see where these things came from. Um, Prior to 1929, or prior to the amalgamation of what became Nigeria, you had three regions. This is a lot of people think it was just the north and the south, southern protectorates. That's not accurate. You had the protectorate of southern Nigeria, which largely consists of today's south, south, and southeast geopolitical zones, with some parts of what is Ondo states, the parts of Ondo states that are now called Akoko Edo. Those parts were part of the protectorate of southern Nigeria. You had the Lagos colony, which
Yes.
was largely Lagos and today's western Nigeria. And then you had the protectorate of northern Nigeria. Now, in the let's forget the other two briefly. The protectorate of southern Nigeria had um, six provinces. The six provinces were the Benin province, the Warri province, the Onitsha province, the Owerri province, the Ogoja province, and the Calabar province. Now, Abo was a part of the Benin province, but the rest of what is now at the Anioma region in today's Delta states were part of the Onitsha province. And you can even see one bit of historical evidence for that is Catholic records. You find that when the Catholics set up their diocese, a lot of the priests who basically spread the gospel of Jesus Christ in the Ekumeko areas were from the Onitsha and Ojoto area. Now, why is that important? Because the last area of resistance to British rule, not just in Igbo land, but in the whole of Nigeria, was actually what is now called Anioma. The Ekumego guerrilla movements harassed the British right up until about 1917 before they were finally brought under control. And because these areas were in what was designated the Onitsha province, they were essentially ruled from Onitsha. Then, after the Aba Women's thing, I don't like calling the Aba Women's riots because calling it riots was what the British decided to do in order to delegitimize what was actually a very valid protest about unfair taxation. After the Aba Women's Affair, in order to for military convenience, because the two major garrisons in what was the protectorate of southern Nigeria were in Benin and Calabar. So you look at distance. Benin is much closer to Asaba than Calabar. Benin is entirely not. So in order to keep them to scale for administrative convenience, the areas around Asaba were excised from the Onitsha province and put in the Benin province. And the British did all of those rearrangements along the length of the River Niger and the River Benue. So, as an example, Abo in today's Delta State used to be part of the Owerri province. It was removed and put in the Warri province. While on the other hand, further south, Yenagoa, Saibama, Kaima, which are in today's Bayelsa State, used to be part of the Owerri province, but happened to be on the east of the River Niger. So they were moved away from the Owerri province, from the Owerri province, and included in the Warri province. So you see that the very first maps of Nigeria, the British tried to administer the new country along ethno-linguistic lines. But as time went on, they began to make divisions more along geographical features. So the point of all this is that before, and you can see it historically, before the Anioma people used to face the east. So again, if you look at, let's go back, because 1929 was a very pivotal year in a lot of things.
So, sorry, if I may butt in here. So what you're trying to, for at least for clarity for the viewers, is you're trying to, I mean, you've agreed there is a conflict or there is a divide. What you're trying to do is to contextualize this divide to say where it came from. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. So if you look at, as an example, a list of the people who were killed in the Aba women's affair, you will find that there were some Asaba women who were killed. So it's when you're studying history, historical records, you have to ask questions.
Sorry, how come you had Asaba women there, or were they living in Aba, or
which is
were
precisely which is precisely the question I'm about to answer.
Okay.
It was easier for Asaba people back then to face the East if they wanted to move, because they spoke the same language. They need to learn an entirely new language in order to settle them. Now, prior to 1929, the Nigerian police, or what became the Nigerian police, was actually 4 distinct forces, which were divided again into those regions. So the Niger Delta Constabulary was the one that was specifically charged with keeping the peace in the old protectorate of southern Nigeria, which again, for the sake of the records, is today's southeast and south-south and the Akoko area of today's Ondo states. The Niger Delta Constabulary was the one who was charged with keeping the peace there. They were ordered by the colonial authorities to kill or to put down the Aba women's protests violently. But they did not. They refused to, because these were their women, as it were. So what the colonialists did was to go to Lagos and bring some policemen from the Yoruba Constabulary. Those ones, because they were not the same people as the women in the Aba area, they didn't have a problem with shooting. So again, if you look at the list of all those who died, you will find that the 50 women who were killed were Igbo women. That list includes their hometowns. While on the other hand, the one policeman who was killed was a Yoruba man. He was brought from outside. So the lesson that the British learned was that the best way to administer this colony and keep them pacified was divide and rule. So the British merged the security forces into one big Nigerian police force and began a policy of posting policemen outside their regions of origin. Because
that still persists today. That's why you will see
that still persists.
That's why you come into Asaba, you come into Anambra or Owerri, you see your commissioner of police is from Castina. He doesn't speak your local language. He doesn't. That's where the nonsense started from.
That's where it started from. It started in 1929. One of the big problems of our so-called independence in Nigeria was that when the British left, the political establishments in Nigeria did not change anything. They simply substituted white-skinned rulers with black-skinned rulers. That's all they did. But the underlying realities of why things happened the way they happened in Nigeria were not changed.
And actually, because they didn't, in fairness to them, maybe they didn't. They thought it was just governance. They didn't understand.
They didn't understand. Yeah, they did not understand the thinking behind those things. Yes. So I'll give another example. I mean, because this is something that a lot of Igbo people do not understand. Most of the very brutal actions that happened against our people during the war were carried out by people from what is today's Middle Belt. The question is why? And the answer is that in 64, shortly after the creation of the Midwest from the Western region, the minorities in the Northern region wanted their own region created. The Northern People's Congress, led by the ex-Sadauna of Sokoto, Ahmadu Bello, refused to grant that request. And the central government, led by Ahmadu Bello's Laki Tafawa Balewa, deployed the army into the Middle Belt areas to brutally suppress those agitations.
That's correct.
The army units that were deployed were led by people named Timothy Omutuego, Christian Anuforo, John Obieno. They were Igbo boys who brutally suppressed the civil riots on behalf of the North. So 3 years later, when we were trying to leave Nigeria, for the Middle Belters, it was time for revenge. It's a historical context they were brutal about it. It's a historical context that we need to keep in mind.
Honestly, I mean, I think we need to reinforce and reemphasize that, because if you, I mean, saying it makes a lot of sense, because if you look at the thinking and the madness that happened with the Saba massacre, you could actually link it to that to understand what level of aggression and thinking and wickedness could lead someone to committing such atrocity. And those that were behind it were never questioned, neither were they prosecuted. Up to today that we speak, it's an injustice that is still crying for justice to be done.
Yes, and the Asaba massacre is not the only. It's not the only thing in Nigerian history that's crying for justice to be done. Nigeria is full of a lot of incidents of violence to the people, where the perpetrators have not been punished, and not only have they not been punished, they have been rewarded. And as long as you have those things happening on a very regular basis, where the perpetrators are not only are they not punished, but they're actively rewarded, then it only reinforces itself. Think about river states as an example. People who have killed people who have committed crimes, murder, have been rewarded in many cases with positions in the River State House of Assembly. What do you think young people in that state will do? It reinforces in their minds the concept that this is the way to go, this is how to live life, and they will do it. Same thing in Lagos, the MC Oluomos. Here was a man who was stabbed at some gathering, and he was in hospital. The hospital had police guards, and then a few weeks later, when he was discharged from hospital, they held his coming out party in a school compound on a school day. It was a Thursday, on a school day during lunch break, with all the children watching. What do you think those children will imbibe as the lesson of that? And the funny thing is, these things are happening in different parts of Nigeria now. It's sort of like a repeat of what happened in the Southeast after the war.
Exactly.
Because of the 20 pounds thing, The people who were quickest to rise to their feet after all of that nonsense were people who had no morals, people who were not the best behaved people, and they were the ones who society began to look up to. So for a very long time, for about 20 to 30 years after the war, um, Igbo society became a society of anything goes, permissiveness. It's beginning to correct. That's one place where we are ahead of the rest of Nigeria. It's beginning to correct in Igbo society. But we should not fall into the trap. It's one trap I see Igbo people fall into a lot of times. We should not fall into the trap of thinking that we are better than the rest of Nigeria. What simply happened was that historical reasons put us ahead of Nigeria,
Yes.
or ahead of the rest of Nigeria for certain things. So, as an example, this Boko Haram thing, we were lucky, or we are lucky, that our war lasted for just 3 years. I'm not saying just 3 years to denigrate the number of lives lost, but in war studies, when a war, typically there's something called an inflection point. When a war lasts for about 7 years, you begin to find that the possibility of that war lasting for much, much longer than 7 years is increased. And why is that? Because if a war lasts for about 7 years or so, then you are beginning to get to a point where generations are now being born who know no other reality
Than war.
than war. How do you negotiate with such people?
Yes. Okay. Now let me come. You've given a historical context as to what led to the so-called division or misunderstanding, but there is something very instructive. Yes, we know the role the British played in dividing us as a people, but before the war, there appeared to be this unity among the Igbos that somehow
Exactly.
gone sour. So can you explain more? Because I will come to when you mention someone like Philip Atiyodun, and when before the first or after the first coup, when in 1966, how they tried forming groups, but we were together before the 1966. What went wrong thereafter?
Survival of the fittest. It's that simple. And it's something we have to understand. You see, if we don't query these things or we don't understand them, then we have a problem. So prior to 1966, there was the premier of the Midwest, Dennis Osadebe, was proudly the Secretary General of the Igbo Progressive Union.
Yes.
There was there was no argument about what a Midwestern Igbo was ethnically. And it was such that Midwestern Igbos were killed alongside their Eastern brethren in the pogroms of 1966. They were killed alongside their Eastern brethren 13 years earlier in the Kano riots of 1953. Everybody knew that Igbo. There was no argument about it.
Mhm.
But you see, during the war, when there was starvation and there was scarcity of resources, it became every man for himself, God for all of us. So my mom, as an example, from Asaba, she was living in the UK, and she tried to of course, because of her Igbo name Chibuzo, her scholarship from Nigeria stopped. So
Wow.
she went to the Biafra office to see if she could get a scholarship, and she was told promptly that you are an Igbo. So you see where how, for example,
Hold on. So we need to, for the younger ones listening, so we need to, again, because this is a personal experience. So sometimes one of the reasons I decided also to bring you on and that we discuss these things that, from personal experiences that we learn. Your mom was told that by the Biafran office in London
by the Biafran office in London,
that she cannot get the
that's
scholarship that Nigeria has denied her because she is a Kaibo. That means
Yes.
Igbo from the West.
Yes.
Now, if assuming she's from, or assuming she was from Owerri, do you think she would have probably gotten that scholarship?
Her closest friend was from Enugu, and she got it.
And she was denied. And
My mom
obviously,
was
as a
denied.
young,
My mom
and
was
obviously
denied,
as
and
a
her
young woman, then she would have that grudge in her heart against
exactly.
the against the nation state, against the state that she basically thought was that she was part of.
Now consider this. My mom's father and some of her brothers had been killed some months earlier in the Asaba massacre.
Now, when she needed succor, she
Exactly.
couldn't. That's a heavy one.
So here's the thing. It's easy for someone like me because of all the study of history I've done. I completely understand the why and the what. The truth is that
But
Biafra,
it wasn't justifiable though. If they were Igbo, they
whether
were Igbo.
whether it was justifiable or not is another matter entirely. The point is there's a reason why Nigerians today behave in certain manners in Nigeria. So you have been on a plane many times from a Western country to Nigeria, and you will see Nigerians queuing properly, behaving quite well at the other end. But the
Until they
moment
get,
you land in
yeah.
Lagos, the animal comes out. It's response to incentive. It's not as if there's nothing psychologically wrong with us. The problem is scarcity mentality. And that was the same thing that happened to my mom back then. Scarcity mentality was what made people behave the way they did. However, at the end of the day, what people need to understand is perception is greater than reality.
Yes.
So people don't react to you based on the reality on the ground. People react to you based on their perception of what you have done. And to answer John Okolie, it doesn't matter whether it was official policy or whether it was the actions of an overzealous official. What matters is this is what happened, and when those kind of things happen, it creates a perception in the mind of
I
people.
don't think I say sorry, but I don't think it's something we actually dwell to. It doesn't matter. Again, you just said it. An act is an act because we see some injustices happening today. Is not most of them are not state policies. Most of them are just someone wielding power. You just continue doing it. So, if we think something that is being done to us today is not right, then we must as well condemn the ones that we did. So, like the example you gave, I wish there was a way to basically apologize for that. Obviously, that's because you're saying it now live on the national, on television. There might be other people that we don't even know. That there are a couple of people that might have walked away, and I think many of us would understand when we get to a man named Philip Asiodun, which actually in one of your piece that you wrote, you mentioned him as well. Now, having said that, my brother, there is something else that I want to understand from the piece you wrote. You said that the Anioma subgroups is divided into two. You have the Enuani and the Ukwani. Enuani and Onitsha people people migrated from Igala along the Ishan.
No, it depends on now
So
for Onitsha's and
okay, so
for
go ahead.
Onitsha's
For me, that's incomplete.
For Onitsha as an example, a lot of Onitsha people will tell you that they migrated from Benin. And you can even see it in their traditional titles. There's an ESL of Onitsha. There's an Owele of Onitsha. These are titles that have a Benin equivalent.
The view of Onitsha
Now,
actually said it that they are from somehow from Benin, I think.
From Benin.
Yes.
Now, what we need to understand is that 400 years ago, the Benin Empire was large. And it extended all the way to the banks of the River Niger in terms of actual imperial um, uh, in terms of actual imperial aspirations. However, um, the, the Benin Empire failed to conquer Asaba. The name of the Asaba warrior that beat them back was a chap called Daike, which is why the Benin, as a mark of respect, the crown prince of Benin is called a Daike. It's a mark of respect for that person who defeated them in battle. However, the the fact that they did not establish their rule over those areas does not mean that, that their influence was not established over those areas. So if you read Olaudah Equiano's book, which is I think for me is one of the best historical records, because at least it's a historical record of by an Igbo man who was taken away from Igbo land and learned how to write English
And he
during
bought,
the slave
bought
trade.
himself free. The first person,
He,
the first
yes,
slave
he
to
bought
free.
himself. He bought himself freedom, but that's besides the point. The point is that he, or at least until he was about 12, he lived in Igbo land. So we have an even earlier record of how our forefathers lived through him. And he was very clear, based on the descriptions of the villages and all of that. I would say that he came from around Ihiala today, in what is today's Anambra State.
Anambra, yeah.
But he was very clear that they used to pay some form of tribute to Benin. It's there in the book. It's in chapter 2 or 3, I think. Now, it shows you how widespread the influence of Benin was, if not necessarily the empire itself. So, if there was an empire, and there was an empire, it means that within the area of influence of the empire, people moved. People moved around for various reasons. They moved and they settled. So when they move and they settle, they become a part of the area that they settled in. Assimilation is not a new thing. It's only in the Nigeria of today that we have this aberration where somebody will come in somewhere and then will stay for a long time and will pretend that he's not from that place, and they will tell you. So, for example, I'm very certain that despite the fact that I pay my taxes in Lagos, I live in Lagos, I've been living in Lagos since I moved back to Nigeria 11 years ago. I can't run for office in Lagos.
Exactly.
They will tell me to go back home. It's actually an abnormality in very normal cultures. I mean, when I was living in the UK, I voted in the when Boris Johnson stood against Ken Livingstone for Mayor of London, I voted for Boris Johnson. So,
but the sad part, hold on. So the sad part to what you alluded to now is, even though Lagos State will discriminate you, you find out it's not about Lagos State, because if someone equally from Lagos State, say, goes to Delta State, Abo, for instance, to do the same thing, so it's just
exactly
the whole mentality is
again what I talked about earlier. Scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
And it comes from the very structure of the Nigerian states. So we have a structure that is not geared towards productivity. Instead, the Nigerian state is geared towards sharing whatever. I mean, the Decree 24 of 1998, which is what people claim is the Constitution, does not mention the word productivity once. But Decree 24 of 1998 mentions or alludes to sharing at least 26 times. So the big problem of Nigeria now is that in Nigeria, we are having a situation where people are sharing a dwindling cake, but the number of people
baking more.
Not even let's forget the baking for one moment. the number of people who are sharing the cake is increasing, but the cake is reducing.
Yes.
Not the natural effect of that is conflict. That is the natural culmination of that. When you have resources getting scarcer, but more people wanting to partake in those increasingly scarce resources, they will fight one another.
Okay. So can I come back to this question of Enuama, Enuani and Ukuani? Now, for the benefit of viewers who don't understand what, when you write about Enuani and Ukuani, what does that, how does that place them in this context?
So the area that is called Anioma is basically, you have basically three areas actually. Oshimili. Oshimili is the areas just by the river Niger.
Water, yeah.
Yeah. Then you have Enuani. Enuani is, so if you are traveling, say from Enugu to Lagos, when you cross the bridge, you notice that you actually begin to ascend.
Ascend, yeah.
Yes, you are climbing. It's a gentle ascent. It's not steep, but you are ascending nevertheless. It's and then it's around after Onichubo that you actually you get on level ground once again. Those areas, that's what Aniocha in Delta states is Enwani. Then the areas, if you are traveling along that route, and then instead of rather than going to Lagos, you are going to Warri, at just outside Asaba, there's a place you turn left towards Ibuzo and then into Delta proper. After Ibuzo, you move on, you get to Obiaruko. You notice that again, you notice again that the land actually descends and flattens out. That area, Undokwa or Ukwani. Okay. So those are the three broad areas of the Anioma region.
Okay.
Ukwani, which essentially is the border between Igbo and the Urhobos. Enuani, which essentially is the border between Igbo land and the Beninese. And then Oshimili, which is an internal Igbo boundary that separates Western Igbo from Eastern Igbo.
Okay. So now let me drag this conversation a little bit where it gets into politics and gets into the political activities that involve these two regions. You earlier before alluded to the fact that Osadebe, that is Dennis Osadebe, the premier of Midwest region. Now, it must be noted for the benefit of the younger ones watching that the Midwest region was created. And when Midwest region was created, the premier was Dennis Osadebe, who also was Igbo. Correct. But again, as we say, he's Igbo, whether you call him West Igbo or which is a tag just for the benefit of this conversation, but it's a tag I hate to use because you are Igbo, full stop. Whether you're West, East, North, South, West.
We're completely on the same page.
Okay. So now what it meant, because if they understood it, if this was understood clearly at that point, I think maybe it could have helped the way, because if they knew that the Igbos were in control of the Midwest, that Igbos were also in control of the old Eastern region. Come on. It's a no-brainer. Some of the actions that happened then probably wouldn't. Now, you alluded to the fact that in that time that Philip Asiodun was the one who advised General Gowon to renege from the Aburi Accord when he pointed out that Ojukwu had outmaneuvered Gowon in the meeting, in the Aburi meeting in Ghana. My question then is, however, some people say that was the former Oba of Benin, that it wasn't Asiodun, or could we argue that two of them convinced Gowon to do that?
Well, Solomon Akenswa, that was the name of the man who became Oba Eritiawa in Benin, was also a top civil servant. He worked closely with Philip Asiodun. However, the book I have read on this matter was quite clear. That's there's the dispatch I've read was quite clear that Philip Asiodu was the chair of the meeting that reviewed the outcome of the Aburi, the Aburi discussion. Remember that when they went to Aburi, that it was that the Ghanaian head of state insisted that only the military boys came for it, so all the civil servants were left behind. So I wasn't there. I was born 14 years after the fact, so I can only say report what I read. And what I read indicated that it was Philip Asiodu who was the main driver of Gowon's reneging. And when you think about it from a purely sociological or geopolitical point of view, you begin to understand why. So there's something.
That's actually the next thing I wanted to ask you. Why do you think it sabotaged it? What,
Yes, there's something called.
Today. What do you think led to that?
Yeah, he did it. What I would say that he did it involuntarily. He likely didn't even know that he was doing it. There's something called it has to do. I forget the name of the concept now, but it has to do with people who are at the fringes of an area and wanting to belong. They tend to become more zealous in defending the interest of the area that they want to belong to. So, for example, President Buhari's current chief of staff, Ibrahim Gambari, for a very long time, he's from Kwara, Ilorin, which is on the fringe, which is from the fringes or on the fringes of the old Fulani Empire. So, for a very long time, he didn't even call himself Agbola Gambari. Agbola, his father gave him Agbola. He preferred to go by the name Ibrahim. It was only in recent times that he began to call himself Agbola. Such a person because he's on the fringes of the Fulani Empire and he believes that he has more to gain by being seen as Fulani, he will actually do more than somebody who is completely comfortable with his identity as a Fulani person. So, in Mr. Asiodu's own case, he is an Asaba man who was born in 34, grew up in Lagos, spoke Yoruba as a first language, and then you had a situation where the Igbos were on the verge of leaving the country. Then you consider the fact that the coup that caused all the trouble in the first place was led by someone who everybody felt was from his hometown, Asaba. Nzeogu was from Okpanam. Okpanam is very close to Asaba. So up until today, a lot of Okpanam people will tell you they are from Asaba. It's kind of how they say the same way some people from Awada say they're from Onitsha. But 100 years ago, Awada and Onitsha were two distinct communities.
Yes.
In reality, Asaba now has actually if you go to GRA Asaba is actually in Okpanam. That's actually traditional Okpanam land. But that's GRA Asaba. The Asaba airport is in Ibuzo. But nobody will call it the Ibuzo airport. It is the Asaba airport. That some cities grow and overtake the areas around them. So you had this situation where Nzeogu was, to all intents and purposes, an Asaba man. It was the coup that he was perceived to have led that caused all the trouble. So when you now had someone who had risen so high up in the federal civil service, Asiodu, it was actually at least to his mind, it was in his interest to be seen to be very pro-Nigeria, not just to be perceived, but to both be perceived and be seen as very pro-Nigerian. So he was such a person in such a situation is likely to give advice that is that you would consider to be dangerous. I mean, his brother Sidney was killed during the Asaba massacre. Did he protest to the government that he was working for about it? No, he did not. Did he complain? No, he did not. Instead, he put his head down and continued working.
Yeah,
It just gives you.
I have read where people say that the death of his brother was a kind of, what some people call karma, payment to him by the things he did.
I don't believe in karma.
Well, again, but there are people who believe in that, and there are people who make that insinuation. But again, like you said, the same system he was protecting actually took his brother. And sadly, was there any was there any closure? Was there any solution? Did he find any help for him after losing his brother?
No, it did not. As a matter of fact, his brother was killed in 67. He spent the next 8 years working in the Federal Civil Service, rose quite high. He was one of the super permanent secretaries that were eventually swept away by the mass murder in 1975. And he spent all of his life, or all of his professional life, dissociating himself from being Igbo. What eventually happened was that for some reason, and at this point I can only speculate, but the speculation is born out of what I would call the shared Nigerian experience. For some reason, at some point, he began to realize what he truly is, that Nigeria will never accept him as being one of them. So in 1992, after the creation of Delta states and all of that, there was a letter that was signed, and I'm trying to see if I can get a copy of it to share on the screen, because I have, if you don't mind, I have a copy of that letter.
That's fine. That's fine. Go ahead. Now,
yeah. So there's a letter that was signed, and he was one of the signatories, basically asking asking Babangida to create an Anioma state separate from Delta states,
yes,
and to excise Onitsha and Atani from Anambra State and include in Anioma states, and that Anioma state should be in the southeast, or should be grouped with that time there was nothing called Southeast Geopolitical Zone, but
to be grouped within the Igbo.
Within the Igbo. Now, the fact that he appended his signature to that letter is very, very instructive, because it tells you that whatever experience he had told him what he really is. So I'm sorry, I can't find. I'll have to.
Okay.
I've forgotten the file name under which I saved it.
It's fine.
But,
it's fine.
I'll find it. What I'll do is I'll find it and send it to you, so you could share with your audience.
Okay. At what point? Because we understand that the Midwest Igbos eventually created a new identity to the extent that the towns of Igbo Akiri changed its name to Ibanke, and most prominent son Chinedu Osai
Bovo
Obomedia, who along with Alexander Madiebo narrowly escaped death in 1963. So now, is it as a result of the coup of 1966 that made him, for instance, drop Chinedu? Because many people didn't know that Obomedia is actually Igbo and had an Igbo name.
So you had a situation where, and this is something we need to understand as a people. Brutally speaking, we lost a war. End of story.
Sure.
We lost a war. And historically, I mean, the first war, the first major war in history that was lost and the losers were not treated very badly by the victors was the Second World War.
Yeah,
historically, yeah, that's the Germans were not treated very badly by the Americans.
Well, they paid for
example.
it because after all, there was a martial law. So the martial law and
they did not pay for it. The Marshall Plan was actually what pushed Germany back on its feet.
Exactly, but they paid for it. The whole plan was paid by the Germans. So
the Germans were not the only one who paid for the Marshall Plan. Everybody in Western Europe paid for the Marshall Plan. Everybody who benefited from it paid for it. I think it's important to point out that distinction. Now, okay, since we've veered into Germany, let's consider this. When the Germans lost at the end of the First World War, they were actually required by the Treaty of Versailles to pay for all of the damage that was inflicted in that war, in the First World War.
Yes, that's correct.
That's historically, that's how victors have always behaved. When you lose a war, they crush you into the ground. You understand? So, for the most part, when people lose a war, you find that those on the fringes do everything that they can to be dissociated from the people who fought the war. So with that in mind, when you consider this, Danzig in Poland, as an example, was once a part of Germany. Consider that the Sudeten area in the Czech Republic was once a part of Germany. Consider that Jutland. Exactly. So it's actually human behavior that's the Germans. Are you seeing the letter? I found it.
Okay, hold on. Let me bring it on screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So the letter here.
So that's the letter that was written in 1992, and if you zoom into it, very you can clearly see the signatures. I'm zooming in. Does that show?
Yes.
You can see the signatures.
Can you zoom it a little bit more, if possible?
I hope it doesn't lose resolution.
No, it's fine. It's still legible. Yeah, I can see it.
So you can see the signatures. By any definition, these were men that people would listen to.
So we have the first one, Honorable Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe Owelo.
Yes.
And you have
Chief Dennis Osadebe.
Chief PC Asiodu.
PC Asiodu is Philip Chiedu Asiodu.
Yes. And what is it? Idama of Asaba. What was that?
Izoma of Asaba.
Okay, Izoma of Asaba. And we have the third one is
Anthony Modena. Yes. Ogene of Onitsha. Then you have Professor Ben Mwabweze.
Now, and quite instructive, just like you said before, these were people of the river line area, like you rightly said, the Mwabweze Boatani.
Mwabweze Boatani. BIC Ijoma is from Ukwani.
Yes.
So it's the reason this is so important, this particular document is so important, is that it shows that the most important people from the area understood.
Exactly.
It's the reason why. It's the reason why you find that in the memorial for the Asaba massacre that was held in 2017, the 50th year anniversary, the keynote speaker was Nyan Wodo. And I was one of the organizers of that. And he apologized in that events for the behaviors and the attitudes of Igbos of the East towards people of Asaba. So at least historically on the record, that's done.
Yes.
Historically, that's done. However, and I think it's important to point this out, that because one of the things that we don't do very well in Nigeria is publication and making sure that everybody sees your point of view. I mean, one thing I disagreed a lot with IPOB, but one thing that I admire is that they know how to get their viewpoints to be seen by as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually jealous of that. I disagree with a lot of what they're fighting for, but I completely admire that ability to get their point of view front and center. It's a very important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Communications is very important. So a lot of Igbo people, both from the east of the Niger and the west of the Niger, do not know that that men of timber and caliber, as it were, from our regions have accepted that this is where we are, this is where we should be.
Exactly.
They don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just, I was about to muse.
I mean, I like that concept, and that's why we are having this conversation, because obviously there is no way we will get into everybody's house, and this is something that's going to stay online for a very long time, probably until we are no more in this earth. But at least people who have ears will listen. We understand where we are coming from. That there is this unity. That these are efforts made by our heroes past, and they basically lived with it and they understood it. That brings me to the point here that you wrote in your article. You said, after the war, Dennis Osadebe with some prominent Igbos banded together. Then I underlined that word. They came together, they banded together to try and resurrect the Igbo Progressive Union. Again, the Igbo Progressive Union, sadly again, was proscribed. For the IPOBians listening here, it's not the first time something is being proscribed. In 1966, Igbo Progressive, yes, by an Igbo man, proscribed the union of his own people. What do you have to say? Why did he proscribe it?
To be honest, I don't have a very flattering opinion of Aguiyi-Ironsi.
Okay, that's fine. But now, let me go further to what you wrote. You said, so they formed in view of that, because the Igbo Progressive Union, the IPU, has been, today it's IPOB, but then it was IPU. Today it's IPUB, but then it was IPU. Now, they formed
IPU, but the thing is, so I think it's important for us to be able to draw historical precedents and history. IPOB is not the natural successor of the Igbo.
No. I'm coming. Hold on. Sorry. Yeah. I'm coming to that. So, eventually they formed the Igbo National Assembly, which was the INA. Okay. Yes. So, which again, we started with the goal of unifying Igbos under common umbrella body. Now,
yes,
again, the federal government again in 1976 banned it by Murtala Mohammed, as you rightly pointed out, and which eventually, because remember again, IPU was banned, and the INA came on board, and it was banned again by Murtala Mohammed, which now led, because they thought, how else can we do this? They had to now go into a social cultural organization, and that is actually how
Ohaneze came. Yeah.
Now, and precisely. In Ohaneze Ndibos, the Ohaneze Ndibo was born, and the original signatory, and that's where I was heading to, was Dennis Osadebe, alongside with Professor Ben Nwabese.
Yes.
Few others. So you can see that level of progression. Again, we don't want to get into the reason why Ironsi banned IPU or Murtala Mohammed banned Igbo National Assembly. But the point is that the Igbos of the West and the Igbos of the East, those we call elders, have always been the ones thinking, how do we come together? How do we come together? And it has always been as if the system, which is the Nigerian state, has been their greatest undoing, putting spanners in the wheels at every move they make. They come in, they keep coming in. Is it?
Yes, the Nigerian state. So I think this is something that is important for us to understand. The Nigerian state, quite unfortunately, does not understand is obsessed with central control.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that it's obsessed with central control is quite easy to see when you think about it. You have boys who were trained only to shoot, who were promoted above their station in life. These boys after the first school suddenly did not. They had no training on real politics, no training on economy, no training on anything. So they were obsessed with centralized control because in the army, centralized control is everything. So it was that mentality that they used to try to rule Nigeria. You can see the progression in the Nigeria gradually seized control of all the resources that belong to the regions, culminating in the Aboyade Commission of 1977, which ended up enshrining the Land Use Act and giving all resources to the federal government. The real tragedy was that the senior civil servants at the time failed to advise these boys. And the Nigerian state has been obsessed with central control since then. The Nigerian state has been completely obsessed with centralized control. If you don't mind, I need to take a picture to send to my dad is calling me, so I want to tell him that I'm in a meeting and then I'll call back.
And I think that would be a nice place to have a break. And
my dad's call will not be on the phone together will not be on the phone for anything less than an hour. So I would just take his screenshots.
Okay.
Yeah, and then let him. So just let me just send this.
So welcome back once more. Nwanze still here having this conversation with Cheta Nwanze. And as he's doing, just trying to reach out to his dad now, let me, when Cheta comes back, let me remind us of one thing he said, which is very instructive. Cheta, in his work, said that once your name is Emeka, figuratively speaking, Nigeria will always happen to you. So, that is very instructive. It says, once your name is Emeka, Nigeria would always happen to you. Now, what does that mean that Nigeria happened to you? That Nigeria would always happen to you? I will bring Cheta back again to have that conversation. So Cheta, I said in your work, you said that once your name is Emeka, Nigeria would always happen to you. Can you explain more what you mean by that?
Yeah, one of my favorite books is Chinua Achebe's The Trouble with Nigeria. And in the book, he said something that's very, very poignant. He said the one thing that all Nigerians can agree on is their disdain for anything Igbo. The Nigerians can unite around the fact that they don't like the Igbo people. Now, there are two ways you can use to interpret it. You can interpret it from the point of that, because these people don't like us, let's free them. You can also choose to interpret it from the point of, these people do not like us because we are what Thomas Sowell calls a middleman minority. Now, if you look at middleman minorities everywhere, the one that our people like to compare themselves with most are the Jews. There's another set of people that are middleman minorities are the Lebanese. There's a common thread with middleman minorities everywhere they exist, which is that the geographical area that they originate from is usually quite small and densely populated as a result, which means that naturally they have to move. And when they have to move, it closes traditional areas of work for them in all of those places, which means that the areas that is open for them most is trading. So by default, they become very good traders. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you choose to look at it, they become prosperous traders. And when they become prosperous traders, it breeds envy among the people who they settled among. It's one of the causes, if I'm to put it like that, of being an Igbo person. The fact that our geographical homestead, if you are to take the three corners of Igbo land, if you look at a map, Igbo land is roughly an inverted triangle. And the three major towns at the points of those triangles are Asaba, Abakaliki, and Aba.
And they all start with A.
That's another matter entirely.
Alpha.
Yeah, but every major Igbo town, with the exception of Nsukka, falls inside the rough triangle drawn by these towns. Now, what's the distance between these towns? Asaba to Abakaliki is about 225 kilometers. Abakaliki to Aba is about 195 kilometers. And then Aba to Asaba is about 175 kilometers. What this means is that in terms of geographical area, Igbo land is roughly 35,000 square kilometers. Sambisa forest is larger than that.
Yes. Niger State is larger than that as well.
The Niger, Borno, Kogi, Yobe are larger than that. Yes. So, given that we have such a small geographical area, we have no other choice than to move, than to disperse. Now, because of our culture, we have a culture that makes us go-getters. The only group in Nigeria that has the equivalent of Onyekwechi Ekwe are Igbo people. If you study Yoruba historynomy or mythology, you will find that there is a tendency to, if things are not going well for you, leave it to God. But the Igbo man will say, the Igbo man, by his very culture and his very nature, will say, no, I will make God agree with me. And God will agree with him.
Yes.
So what it means is that the Igbo man will become successful anywhere he goes. Think about it. In 1970, we were given 20 pounds to start life again, regardless of how much we bought. And many Igbo people did not get that money. Yes. Very many. Because the way it was given was, if Cheta, Gabriel Zeku, Kanayo Mweta, John Okole, Ugo Gold, and Mazi Ezeoke came together and gathered all our money and said, okay, Mazi Ezeoke, go to the Nigerian bank and collect our 20 pounds. What actually happened was that the Nigerian bank will give only you that showed up physically the 20 pounds.
Then you come back and share the 20 pounds.
Then you come back and share among the 5 people, that's all of you. So essentially each of you got 4 pounds. That's what happened. Yet 11 years later, when Nigeria entered recession, we were almost at the top of the pile. In the space of 11 years, we had closed the financial gap.
Very aggressive way.
When you consider this, because that was the second time in history that it happened within the context of Nigeria. The first time was between 1929 and 1939, when three Igbo people, Ozumba Mbadiwe, Jaja Nwachukwu, and Nnamdi Azikiwe, returned to Nigeria. You see, prior to that, the Igbo man in the context of Nigeria was what the Benue man is today, what the Akwa Ibom and Calabar man was 2 decades ago, which is that we were the houseboys to the Yoruba. It's the reason why a lot of Igbo people took the name, changed their names. So somebody that is called Kelechi will suddenly become KC. Somebody that is Nkiru suddenly becomes KY, so NK or Kiki. Somebody that's Kanayo is KY. We had those kind of things in order to hide our identity. But by the time these three men came back to Nigeria and the Igbo Progressive Union was formed, within a generation, we were suddenly competing with Yorubas as the prime movers of Nigeria's civil service.
Yeah, and even, I mean, within a couple of years, an Igbo man was suddenly considered, to be the vice president of that nation then. Progress.
That was in 1979.
Exactly.
Alex Ekwueme.
So 9 years after the war. 8 years plus.
The fact that we did it twice says a lot about the kind of people we are. But there are two things that come with this, and both of them are negative. Number one, our propensity to hubris. When an Igbo man has made money, God, you don't want to, he will let you know that he has made money. And exactly. And he will tell you. I said he will tell you point blank. He will. Now, what we don't tend to realize is that actually engenders a lot of envy.
Yes.
First, which brings us to the second point, which is the overall Nigerian attitude towards competition. It's a very bad attitude. It's quite unfortunate, but it is.
Which led to the introduction of federal character and all the rubbish in order to help certain people rather
federal
than
character. No, as I've understood Nigeria more, federal character is actually good. The problem is not the problem is not federal character. The problem is quota system.
Yes, quota system. I meant, sorry. Yes.
So, and it's important for us to be able to draw out those differences. You see, in a country that has at least 250 ethnic groups, you need some form of federal character in order to make everybody feel equitable. Yeah, people need to understand that. I mean, federal character is sort of like is an advanced level of affirmative action on one end of the scale, while on the other end of the scale of affirmative action is quota system. So, in 1973, Nigeria introduced this concept called educationally disadvantaged states to enable the North to catch up to the rest of the South in 10 years.
And now and they are doing it not considering those from
1973 was 47 years ago.
Yeah. So, and hold on, even when they started it, they didn't put into consideration a region that was shut out for 3 years and there was no education.
There was no point putting the East into that.
Exactly, because
there was no point in 73. And let me tell you why. The northern elites did their people dirty under the British rule, because it was actually a deal between Atahiro II and Frederick Lugard to keep missionaries out of the north, which is why, as of the so-called independence in 1960, 2% of the population in the north was educated, Western education. So to be fair to the North, they actually had they were actually educationally disadvantaged.
There is no argument.
To be fair to them.
But the fact is,
the problem is you put a policy in place in 73, again, 47 years ago. Picking where the born 73 is ready to be a grandfather. You put a policy there and you have failed completely. You are still doing educational disadvantage. That is the failure.
This is 2020, and you have a case of unitary school where a child from Anambra who must explain to the dad that he or she has failed by scoring 139. Now, and you take a girl child from Yobe that must score only 2. You know what it means? Even if you're blind, just mark B, 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 just all through. There is no way you get less than 10. That's what it means.
Of course.
So, and it's actually, they are hurting themselves because some people no journey and but this one, they are only just
you see, you have just, that is one of my favorite Igbo proverbs. When you hold somebody down, you're holding yourself down.
You can't stand up.
So these are the structural inequalities that are inbuilt in the Nigerian system, because a certain group of people want to remain in power forever, and then for their children to remain in power forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's the feudal system. So that's the big the big clash, as it were, in the Nigerian states. You have feudalists in the north, and then you have, I don't like using the word progressives, but I can't think of another word in the south.
Yes.
So you have these feudalists, and it is not an accident. I mean, the evidence is there. We've had 20 years of this so-called democracy now. So the evidence is there. When we had Obasanjo from the south, Nigeria's GDP grew, reforms were brought into place, and all of that, and the country moved at pace.
Yeah.
Then Obasanjo left, and Yar'Adua came into office, and Yar'Adua began to unroll a lot of the reforms that Obasanjo made. Then he died, and Jonathan came into office, and the private sector grew again.
And accelerated development.
And then Jonathan left, and this clown came in, and we can see all of the withdrawal. The state is getting bigger. The problem that he's facing now is that the state clearly does not have the capacity to do what he wants it to do. One. And it is showing up in different things, which brings me to something else that I think is very important for our people to understand. I work in geopolitics. That's my day-to-day. So all these things, I look at them every day. And it is important to it's important for people to see some of
okay. Ọ bụrụ na ifeda agha na ọ bụrụ na olu na nke agha anyị akọwa ka atapiala ụmụnne anyị n'Igbo maka na ibe a na-eme agha uche ka a na-anọ a sị na a na-ebukpo onye uche da na-ekpokọ. So it's up to you.
Yes, but we have a duty to educate our people as much as we can.
So let me bring your slide in. Let me bring it in. So can you expand it, please?
Sorry, wrong guy.
I think you can hold your a MacBook. You can hold. I'm
sorry, I don't use Mac. Sorry, it's not.
Okay. Control and your mouse.
I'll stop sharing briefly. Escape it and then come back. Something went wrong, so let me just open it all over again.
Okay.
My faults.
So honestly, I think the great Igbo nation is in a dilemma. We are indeed in a Anyway, I think there are other things we would do, talk about, in conclusion here. While you're doing that, let me bring something to you. I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but let's
Yeah.
just get on. In your piece, you talked about Anioma, in your piece, Anioma versus Igbo, you mentioned that Elizabeth Ishieshe influenced you a lot.
Isiche,
Yeah.
Elizabeth Isiche, yeah.
Isichie influenced you a lot, especially her work,
Yes.
A History of the Igbo People. And anyone watching me here, it's a book I've ordered from Amazon. I haven't read it before, but after reading your work, I did order that book. You can go to Amazon and do. Um, it's the book is called A History of the Igbo People. Now, how did that book influence you? How did that, because you talked about it and you talked about meeting her and that you felt,
Unfortunately, yeah, unfortunately, the meeting may not happen. Um, Elizabeth Isiche is well over 80.
yes,
Um,
I
and
wanted
we've,
sorry, I wanted to say, you are talking about meeting her and you talk about flying to Australia. And I'm thinking, why wait? You can meet her tomorrow. Just dig out the contact.
no, well, I have already made all those efforts. But she's family retired.
Okay.
Yeah, she's family retired.
So can't you do a Zoom, the way we've been
And
conversing?
that's what I'm saying. She's family retired. She doesn't want to have when it comes to her work. She's not she's not interested in speaking with anybody
Well, but she is
about
an
her work.
authority that has to help us in this.
She is an authority, but I understand. See, at the end of the day, on your chat, so they tend to be very strict about certain things. She retired 5 years ago, so she doesn't do interviews. She doesn't do anything work related. Um, as in, the work is out there. Go and fix it. So this is one of those unfortunate things where I will say that uh, opportunity. If I had made this appeal 6 years ago, then she would have been willing to talk. But when she got to age 75, she decided that she wasn't doing it again. And so we have to respect that decision.
Well, yes, we have to, but equally, remember that Woloshenko has retired so many times.
Yeah, Wole Soyinka is, I think, is quite a different kettle of fish. Um, he he likes the limelight. Um, so, so in short, he's actually a good example because the only work you're going to get from Wole Soyinka, he will still give interviews and all of that. But the only work you're going to get from him till he departs us and joins his ancestors is his memoirs. And I can as somebody who studies a lot of history, I can guarantee you that he has already written his memoirs. What just happens is that occasionally he comes up, updates it, and then he has already written it and probably has given instructions that when he dies, it should be published, which was pretty much the same thing that Chinua Achebe did with There Was a Country. These are people who understand the gravity of history.
But the only one
So
that I felt disappointed to yet is the great Dimo Juku. That
yes,
aside,
it's for
I
me.
was
For me,
involved.
it's a disappointment that he didn't,
I'm
because
telling
at the end
you,
of the day,
to me, the
John
personal side.
Satire said, yeah, John Satire said, those who don't learn from history are those who repeat it, which is something is very important for us to address directly in the IPOP. We are making the same mistakes that our fathers made in 1967.
How?
If we want to have a Biafra, there are two things that are absolutely compulsory for us to have. We need the support of the Southern minorities, the 100% support of the Southern minorities, and we need the support of Cameroon. If we don't have both of them, then Biafra cannot work.
But you can't have the support of Cameroon that is doing the same thing the Igbos are going through to the Western Cameroon. But do not lose your thought. Let's get back to what. Let me share this document now. Can you expand this document and
Yes.
tell us what you
Okay.
want to?
So this is basically about Nigeria's economy. You can see that the red is what is called the Lakaji corridor. and the blue is what is called this Eastern Economic Corridor. Now, most people, when you ask them, they will tell you that, oh, that the most important resource that Nigeria has is oil. It's not. It's the coastline. Again, this is something that Igbo needs to understand. Aside from human resources, the most important resource I in this country, Obodo, Nigeria, with that coastline, Miri. And why is that? 92% of global trade goes through water. So for the north, for northern Nigeria, it is an absolutely crucial imperative that they have access to the ports. Now, they believe that they cannot control us, which is one of the reasons why they have abandoned the ports in Warri, in Port Harcourt, in Calabar, in favor of the one in Lagos. But it is not an accident that since 1961, with the exception of Dapo Sarumi, every head of the Nigerian Ports Authority has been in Northern.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an accident.
And nothing is happening about it.
Again, it's the control of Abuja.
But sadly enough,
it's one of the reasons why Abuja is obsessed with control.
But even under 8 years of Obasanjo, it didn't change.
That was, I said, with the exception of Dapo Sarumi. Dapo Sarumi was the head of the MPA under Obasanjo.
For how long?
I think he was there for 5 years.
And he went back to the status quo.
Well, by the time he left, by the time his tenure expired, Obasanjo had left.
Because it's just like heading the police and DSS. When you look at the loop-sided appointment happening, you find out that even if tomorrow you have an Igbo presidency, Yoruba presidency, president from the south, whatever, the ones to guide you are still those already, because they've already inserted them in there. You can't take them away. Now,
exactly.
This
is why it is important for us to understand the geopolitics of our region. And our region is not just Nigeria, the whole of West Africa. You see, we actually lie in a very critical region for global stability. Because of Nigeria's geopolitical location, you find that if Nigeria falls apart, and it's one of the reasons why do you think, as an example, that during the Biafran War, Britain, the US, and Russia, which were all on the opposing sides of the Cold War, all came together to support Nigeria against us? Because one thing that they don't want to see is an Africa that falls apart, because the single biggest population source has fallen apart. And I'll give an example. In 2011, Syria fell apart. Syria, 28 million people fell apart. And till now, they haven't recovered from the Syrian refugee crisis.
Yes.
Now, imagine if Nigeria, with its 150 million people, falls apart. Not only will we fall apart on our own, we'll take the whole of West Africa and Central Africa with us. So now you're talking of about 400 million people. If 28 million people could scatter the economy of Europe in many ways, what will 400 million people do?
That would be locust.
So geopolitically, we need to understand the situation, the global environment we're in, so that we can plan how to pursue our objectives. Our objectives is about interests. What is the interest? It's not just about what emotionally we want. It's about the interest, what will achieve the best kind of results for our people.
So, and what do you think? We will be rounding up now.
Kanayo and chemistry, I spoke to her son. So, unless he was lying to me, she's not late. That is Betty Siche.
Okay, so someone saying that the Elizabeth is late, and and he's confirming to you that she's not late. Please, can we be
Yeah.
guide? And now, in conclusion, here, my good brother Cheta, what is the solution to the current Igbo quagmire? Now, because it hurts me, that's why I wanted to. This conversation I'm having with you, I have begged my good brother, Dr. Tony Mwezigwe Nwankwo. I don't know if you know him.
I
Once
know
a
of him.
lecturer, yeah, once a lecturer at the
I don't know him, but I know of him.
okay. He once lectured in the at the UNN, and he's been sending me series of what he's been writing. You know, the Igbo, about the Igbo of the East and Igbo of the West. His last one is Adventures and Travails of a West Niger Igbo Patriot. And honestly, after reading them, they really get me. I wouldn't say angry, but I will be disappointed because rather than I reached out to him saying, "Can we stop this? Can we close rank?" I know you from what you've said so far, you've been offended, but it doesn't help us to keep going back to that open wood and keep adding it salt. Bringing me to that concluding thought now will be, what is it that we can do to make sure that that peace? You talked about how Nyanwodo, as the leader of the Ohanese Ndigbo in 2017, made that statement in Asaba to commemorate the 50 years of the Asaba massacre, and that he has apologized. You know, what is it that we, the younger generations, can do more to make sure that the unity is cemented more? Because sometimes I
So
can get angry that we have states, but sadly that is the way. Like,
well, what's I would say what Igbo needs to do
mm,
generally. We number one, we need we need an attitude shift. I think one of our problems is our arrogance. So I see as an example the southern minorities, the eastern minorities. I see the way a lot of our people talk to them. You can't keep shouting at somebody and calling him a slave and then expect that he will come and work with you. It's not going to happen. That's one. Number two, we need to realize Nigeria is going to implode, whether we like it or not. It's
yes,
what I call the Nigerian conundrum.
it's
Um,
not even,
as
it's about when, not if.
Yeah, it's about when. That's why I said Nigeria, whether I like it, Nigeria is going to implode. It's not. Uh, I mean, given the fiscal situation. So the question is, when it implodes, how do we position our region, given our own political realities?
Mhm.
Do we want to go a Biafra where, as a trading people, which is what we are, will now be surrounded by hostile people on all sides? That's the shortcut to starvation. Or do we want to, going back to the map I shared earlier, looking at the blue area, do we want to be in a position to control all the trade all the way from Port Harcourt to Jamena beyond the shores of Nigeria? We can do it. We are capable of doing it. But we need to start focusing on the economy. We need to start holding our own elected leaders to account. Because we have a situation where, as an example, the tax laws in Imo State, as we are so, guess when they were passed into law? The Imo Tax Code, 1958. That's the tax code that Imo State is using is the tax code of the old Eastern region.
Mhm.
How do you expect to progress when you have not updated your statutes to conform with current realities? Is it an is it is not is it surprising now when for everybody to see that Imo State, as an example, is doing very bad in terms of internal revenue generation? Why not? They will do badly when, I mean, people who were adults in 1958 is one of two things: either they are dead or they are almost dead. So the people who passed those laws then, and as in their realities were very different from our realities. 1958 was 62 years ago. So we need to hold our leaders to accounts internally. We need to understand that Nigeria is, whether Nigeria likes it or not, whether Abuja likes it or not, Nigeria will restructure. So it's Nigeria can either restructure peacefully by us thinking about it and doing it in an orderly fashion, or Nigeria will restructure forcefully by an implosion. But simply because of the threats of jihadi groups, the world will actually come to prevent a Nigeria breakup. Because nobody will want another Somalia. We have one Somalia in the eastern end of Africa. Then on the same latitude, we'll now have a Nigeria that has included. Already, piracy is the Nigeria, a so-called peaceful Nigeria, already presents the worst case of piracy in the world. We do more piracy here, sea piracy, than Somalia does. Imagine if we now devolve into a Bantustan region, the way Somalia has done. People will do everything to prevent that.
And bear in mind, that is the only nation that is not on international or intranational conflict that has so many terror groups that they give to the world. So many terror groups, ranging from Boko Haram to the fourth one in the whole world. That's the Fulani herdsmen. You know, it's
in conflict studies again. I always point to this. I mean, I do that's what I do. I run SBM Intelligence, so we do geopolitics. All of the talk about Africa in conflict studies in the West now is about the Sahel. So, which means that any military intervention will be geared towards preserving status quo. It's something we must be realistic about.
Because they are also, and that's why sometimes some of us and those people in the new struggle, when they make some inquiries and inroads and they meet blocks, they will go back and say, "Oh, these people we have been sabotaged." But the reality is just what you said.
It's geopolitics.
No nation would actually open their eyes and want to come openly to support what was going to hurt their own interests, because it's about nationalism.
Exactly, it's about interests. It's all about interests.
Be it in Europe, I mean, as you rightly said, Syria 28 million. We saw the ways actually Turkey saved the day. You saw the way they were entering, even with what's it called, Czech Republic. Germany took over like a million people. I mean, come on. England had to shut their borders because of the channels. They were lucky, but still they took the younger ones. Now imagine we're 200 million people. Now the question is, how can this?
Nigeria is not 200 million, just for the records.
No. I mean, on papers, we're not even up to 120 million anyway. I mean,
we're somewhere between 120 and 140. That's again.
Because we're not being
because of the nature of
we read
yes, but because of the nature of what I do, I see a lot of consumption data. So the consumption data points towards between 120 and 140. That's where it's point. That's where I think we are.
For me, around 120, yeah, it's is. I mean, you know what it means to be 200. It's just that we keep plucking figures from somewhere anyway. But be that as it may, the thing is, what could be the easiest strategy to get off? Because obviously, as you said, as long as you're Chinedu, and now let me replace, if your name is Emeka, figuratively, of course, let me replace Emeka with Southern Nigeria. That has become the trend. You know, I have many people on this platform that will say it is a Republic of Biafra or nothing. And people like me will say, I would rather prefer and go for a Southern Nigeria. for obvious reason. You know, Southern Nigeria is it's if you're under the umbrella of Southern Nigeria, you have less risk of invasion, less risk of having what happened, a repeat of what happened in 1967, because again, you have to now begin to want to get the whole Southern Nigeria probably with middle belt under subjugation.
Yeah, but then let's look at the position of the minorities.
Yes.
If we go back to 1961, the region of Cameroon that is now trying to get away from Cameroon,
Was
the
with us.
Amazonian region, they were with us.
Yes.
The reason that they refused to stay with Nigeria was specifically because of Igbo, because of what Zik did to Ayo Ita back in '56, and that is so we need again as a so-called majority Igbo, we need to try to put ourselves in the shoes of the other people that we occupy this space in. The irony of, or one of the ironies of the whole thing is, for example, the northern minorities are suffering under the Fulani domination right now. But if they look at
The
alternative, which is a divided Nigeria, they will know that they will cease to exist in a decade or two if we leave Nigeria. So they would rather that we remain in Nigeria with them, so that because of our sheer size, we keep the Fulani busy. This also applies in the West. The Western minorities, the Edos, for example, or the far west, the people of Badagry, would rather remain in a Nigeria so that they will not be swallowed and dominated by the Yoruba. And even our own minorities in the East is the same dynamic. You understand? So the minorities in Nigeria would rather a Nigeria so that the big three are busy cancelling themselves out than a broken up country where suddenly in that country they are truly minorities. And we need to understand this, because it will enable us to know the kind of deals to reach with the minorities in order to push our interests. You can't just come and tell people, oh, Biafra or nothing. You have to sell to him. We are supposed to be salesmen. So I don't get why we keep shouting at them, Biafra or nothing. No, why not sell the idea? Why should they buy into it? Convince them. Once you can convince them, once you can convince somebody of the viability of a project, he will follow you to the gates of hell for that project. But when he's not convinced, he will fight you. We've not done the groundwork. So it will not happen.
Well, you see, whether it will happen or not, there is one fundamental thing that is obvious. I can't say that enough. The Nigerian state has never worked, and the Nigerian state is not working. The Nigerian state is configured ab initio.
Nigeria is a failed state. Let's get that right.
Exactly. So I mean, there is no. If we all know Nigeria is a failed state, Nigeria, it's it's something that keeps giving you headache. Something it is configured not to work. Again, I come back to the point I made before. How can it be, like you rightly pointed out, 47 years after, 47 freaking years, you still have a child that had to score 2, and one who scores 139 will go home crying to the mom, oh, mom, I failed this exam because I scored 139. However, someone who scored less than 10 is jubilating that he or she is getting into a unitary school, and you call that one nation 47 years after. And by the way, I don't know, I think I need to probably find a way to get Olisa Abakoba on this program, because I need to find out, Olisa Abakoba actually went to court to when Wike, as Minister of State for Education, confirmed that figures. And he went to court and he won. I think he won in 2017, I think. 3 years later.
Yes. He won. He won. He won under a government that does not obey court orders.
Jesus Christ. And how do you want people? How can we now look people in the face and tell them to still be proud of that nation? A nation that cannot even obey common because it affects them. It doesn't, it gets me angry sometimes that I wish I can walk, I wish there is a way to just walk away because it just gets me mad.
I'm not so personally. I don't think that getting angry is a solution. What I would say is understand where we are, how we are, why we are here, and then figure out intelligent solutions to get out of the quagmire.
Sure.
It's just that simple.
Sure. And in figuring out that solution, and hence my advice to my brothers and my friends, there is a saying in Anambra that who knows only one road, he doesn't know any road. So there must be many ways to kill this rat. So it mustn't necessarily be one, but it's, part of the conversation is, the more we converse about it, the more we think about options and see which one will favor us most. If I keep saying the Igbos of the West, the Igbos of the East are more than enough to be a nation of their own if push come to shove.
Completely true.
Because at the end of the day, we have countries like Singapore that is not even half the size of Anambra State. Probably with our same population.
I think Singapore is the wrong comparison though.
Well,
for the simple reason Singapore is surrounded on three or four sides by water. They have access to that water.
Well, they have access to water, but there are other countries in this world. My point is, if you take by virtue of population census, if you take the 5 states in the southeast, now take Igbos on the fringes of other states, and if you take the Igbos of the southeast and the Anioma, you take the other Igbos in the fringes, like some of them in the in rivers and other areas, there is no way the Igbos are not up to 30 million. I mean, that's being very conservative here. That is being, knowing that Nigerian population is not up to, as I said before, is not up to 200 million. So just minimum. I mean, some people argue that we are over 50, but I mean, I'm just being realistic and okay. So if I take that again, some people are saying Switzerland, UAE, Switzerland.
The UAE is not landlocked.
No, UAE has water. I mean, we go to the beach anyway.
The geopolitical realities of Europe and the geopolitical realities of Africa are different. So Switzerland is not a very good example for what we want to talk about. And I think more important is the fact that the Great River Danube passes through Austria, the Great River Rhine passes through Switzerland, and they are not surrounded by hostile people who want to destroy them.
It's the key point you've just mentioned, and everyone needs to pay attention to, is there part of hostility? Is that common? Just as Tino Asebet says in his book, The Trouble with Nigeria is that the Nigerian state unifies themselves when it comes to a common ground against
hatred of Igbo people.
Yes, that's the only thing. It's just the common hatred of the Igbo is the only thing that unifies them. But it appears by the recent events that the things the Igbos were only the ones bearing brunt of is now coming back to haunt them. Look at the Middle Belt, for instance. I mean, who would have thought in this world that at some point someone like General T.Y. Danjuma will stand up in a convocation ceremony and say those words that he said? A man.
Again, it's like I explained earlier. Yes, it's coming back to haunt them, but we need to look at ourselves. Remember that our people didn't. Some of our people were involved in the killings of Middle Belters in '64. That's one. And Just as importantly, what I explained in terms of geopolitics, which is for them, it will be better for all of us to be inside Nigeria so that they are protected by our wits.
That's their
We need
thinking.
to understand yeah, we are a protective shield for it. It's not just their thinking. It is actually a geopolitical reality. We are a protective shield for them by virtue of our wits.
Mm-hmm.
They may not like the nature of the shield, but it is a shield.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that
True.
simple. So they will do everything to hold on to that shield,
To protect it, yeah.
to protect them.
Well, it's been again, but finally here, what is it that we've talked about generally the place of Igbo here in today's Nigeria, and we still see people who say they are not Igbos. I watched a video from I think
Sunday
the
Olise.
famous Sandoli, and I'm like, the force with which he was denying his Igbo-ness, was that necessary? I mean, he wasn't on that.
Again, we've discussed this earlier in this program. Sunday Olise and people like him are a victim of the fact that we lost the war. End of story. We must understand where they're coming from. And I gave examples of nations that were a part of Germany and decided after the First World War that they no longer wanted to be part of Germany. We must understand. J.J. Okocha's town is is about 6 hours walk from Sunday Olise's town. I'm very careful to use the word walk because if you decide to drive, it's less than 15 minutes. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is from the same part of Anioma. Neither J.J. Okocha nor Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala will deny that they are Igbo. Ralph Uweche was president of Ohanese, longest serving president of Ohanese. He was from that same place. The most successful Biafran general in the war was Hannibal Hatrusia. He was from Asaba. Patu Tomi, one of the erudite Nigerian academics, proudly associates with being Igbo at every point in time. So you have to understand again that there are people who will deny their Igbo-ness because of what happened in 67 to 70. The key thing is understand them. It's something we have to change as a people. I keep saying our biggest self-defeating problem as a people in Igbo is hubris. So the tendency will be to shout at them. Don't shout at them. Explain to them. Convince them.
Or we call them Sabo most times, which has become a common language. Whenever I don't agree with you, I'll just call you Sabo.
Exactly. It helps nobody, and it actually weakens our case. It weakens our cause.
That's true. It is, it is indeed. But again, it's one of those, it's one of those things that we have to keep pushing. We keep pushing. It's not a day's job. Over time, we believe that programs like this, when people listen to them, reflect and go back, because some of the historical discussions that we have this afternoon, not many people are aware of them. Like I have heard people saying, what's it called? The Philip Asiodun was Sabo, was this, was the other one, but no one ever put what he went through or the context of what pushed him in taking those decisions that he took. And even that he eventually, probably not coming out to say, I regretted what I did, but you can see that he regretted what he did by his current actions, by the actions of going back to. And I think sometimes we as Ndibo must not be too rigid, that if somebody begins to retrace their steps, even without saying it, that we can begin to accept that individual back. Because obviously that person has sinned, he cannot be accepted. And in the main Igbo folk, we do it, but sometimes very hard for Igbos to do it, quote unquote, with the Igbos of the West, because after all, we had Omar Sanda, who eventually came back and became General Ikenwachuku. And we know what Ikenwachuku eventually attained within the Igbo society. So the same golden leaf that we extend to others, we can as well, we extend to ourselves, we have to also extend that to others. It has been a very wonderful 2-hour conversation